The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours, November 15, 2019, over the contested airspace of the Strait of Hormuz. Air traffic control at Al Dhafra Air Base stared at their screens in confusion. The blip moved with the precision of a military aircraft, yet its configuration matched nothing in their database. The transponder code flickered intermittently, displaying fragments of outdated NATO designations that hadn't been used since the Cold War. Control, this is Raptor 2-1. I've got visual on unknown aircraft bearing 270, altitude Angels 22. Configuration is, Christ, I don't know what I'm looking at. The F-22 pilot's voice crackled through static, his usual cockpit confidence replaced by genuine bewilderment. The aircraft moved like liquid mercury against the dawn sky. Its silhouette defied conventional aerodynamics, too angular for a fighter, too streamlined for a bomber, with wing geometries that seemed to shift in the peripheral vision of pursuing pilots. 3 separate squadrons attempted intercept protocols, only to find themselves outmaneuvered by flight patterns that bordered on supernatural. General Harrison Blackwood had seen everything in his 30-year career. He'd commanded air operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and the classified Syrian interventions that never made headlines. But as he studied the gun camera footage in the Situation Room, his weathered hands trembled against his coffee cup. The aircraft's movements weren't just skilled, they were personal, intimate with the sky in a way that spoke of decades of experience. "Sir, we've run the flight characteristics through every database," Colonel Martinez reported, her voice tight with frustration. "DARPA projects, experimental prototypes, even theoretical configurations from Lockheed Skunk Works. Nothing matches." The mystery deepened when the aircraft suddenly accelerated beyond the capabilities of known propulsion systems, climbing to altitude levels that should have killed any human pilot. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, the signature vanished. Not gradually, not with the typical fade of distance. It simply ceased to exist, leaving only the morning sky and 3 squadrons of bewildered airmen. But General Blackwood recognized something in the footage that others missed. The way the aircraft banked left during evasive maneuvers, the slight hesitation before each course correction, the almost balletic precision of its defensive spirals. These weren't programmed responses or artificial intelligence algorithms. They were human instincts, refined through years of combat experience. "Martinez," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge, "run this footage through Code Bravo archives, authorization level black." The colonel's eyes widened. Code Bravo housed the military's most sensitive declassified operations, missions so classified that their existence had been denied for decades. As she initiated the search protocol, neither of them anticipated that the truth would be more extraordinary than any fiction. The aircraft's pilot had been dead for 7 years. At least, that's what the official records claimed. But ghosts don't fly fighters, and the sky doesn't lie about the skill of those who navigate its infinite depths. The morning sun rose over the Persian Gulf, casting long shadows across the water. Somewhere in the vast expanse of classified documents and forgotten missions, the truth waited. The mystery of the unknown aircraft was about to become the revelation of an extraordinary pilot whose story had been buried beneath layers of military secrecy and bureaucratic silence. The ghost in the machine was very much alive, and she had unfinished business with the sky that had once betrayed her. Major Catherine "Viper" Thorne had been officially dead since March 12, 2012. The memorial service at Arlington National Cemetery drew hundreds of military personnel, her flag-draped coffin lowered into earth that would never hold her remains. Her F-16 had supposedly crashed during a classified mission over the Kandahar province, the wreckage too scattered and burned to recover her body. The military machine processed her death with bureaucratic efficiency, filing reports that would gather dust in Pentagon archives. But bureaucracy couldn't account for the pilot who'd ejected 30 seconds before impact, who'd watched her aircraft disintegrate against the Afghan mountainside while she floated down beneath a damaged parachute. The Taliban fighters who found her broken body assumed she was dead, a reasonable conclusion given the compound fractures and massive blood loss. They left her where she fell, another casualty in an endless war. Catherine Thorne died that day, in every official sense. The woman who crawled from that crater, who spent 3 months recovering in a cave system known only to local herders, was someone else entirely. Someone who'd learned that survival demanded the complete abandonment of who you used to be. The herders called her Shadbaz, the falcon that hunts in darkness. They taught her their languages, their customs, their intimate knowledge of mountain passes that didn't exist on any military map. In return, she used her pilots' understanding of aircraft patterns to help them avoid coalition bombing runs. It was a symbiotic relationship born of necessity and forged in the crucible of mutual survival. For 7 years, Catherine Thorne remained dead to the world. She moved through the shadows of international conflict zones, her pilot skills adapted to new purposes. She flew cargo runs for humanitarian organizations, her modified aircraft configurations allowing access to airstrips that conventional planes couldn't reach. She transported refugees across closed borders, medical supplies to embattled regions, and occasionally, intelligence operatives who needed to disappear. The aircraft that puzzled radar operators across 3 continents was her masterpiece, a heavily modified F-16 that she'd rebuilt from crashed components and black market parts. Its radar signature was deliberately confusing, incorporating stealth technology stolen from various sources and adapted with innovations that would have impressed even Lockheed Martin's engineers. She'd named it Resurrection, though she never spoke that name aloud. But on November 15, 2019, something changed. Intelligence reports indicated that her former squadron, the 421st Fighter Squadron, the Black Widows, was walking into a trap. An arms dealer named Kozlov had provided surface-to-air missiles to insurgent groups, specifically targeting American fighter formations. The same squadron that had mourned her death 7 years ago was about to face the same fate that had officially killed her. Catherine Thorne couldn't let that happen. The dead don't have obligations to the living, but the living carry responsibilities that transcend official records. She'd spent 7 years learning to be a ghost, but ghosts can touch the world when they choose to manifest. The modified F-16 lifted off from a hidden airstrip in the Caucasus Mountains, its turbofan engine singing a familiar song that Catherine had missed more than she'd realized. She was violating about 50 international laws and probably twice as many military regulations. But regulation had never been her strongest suit, even when she'd been officially alive. As she flew toward the Persian Gulf, Catherine's hands found the familiar rhythm of combat flight. The sky welcomed her back like an old friend, and for the first time in 7 years, she felt truly alive. General Blackwood's security clearance granted him access to files that officially didn't exist. The Code Bravo archives contained operational records from missions so classified that their very existence was compartmentalized beyond normal intelligence protocols. As the search algorithm processed the mysterious aircraft footage, decades of buried history began to surface. The first match appeared at 6:23 hours, Operation Nightfall, a classified interdiction mission from 2012. The file contained gun camera footage from Major Catherine Thorne's final flight, her F-16 engaged in combat with unknown aircraft over the Afghan mountains. The official report stated that she'd been shot down by surface-to-air missiles, but the classified footage told a different story. "Jesus Christ," Colonel Martinez whispered, studying the tactical display. "She didn't get shot down, she was set up." The truth was worse than equipment failure or enemy action. Major Thorne had discovered that her commanding officer, Colonel Victor Reeves, was providing flight plans to insurgent groups in exchange for location data on high-value targets. When she'd attempted to report the treason through proper channels, She'd found that the corruption extended further up the chain of command than anyone had imagined. Her final mission had been designed to eliminate her. The surface-to-air missiles had been positioned precisely along her flight path, their operators informed of her exact arrival time and altitude. Colonel Reeves had personally briefed her on the mission, providing coordinates that would lead her directly into a kill zone. The only element he hadn't anticipated was Catherine Thorne's exceptional piloting skills and her ability to read tactical situations better than most generals. She'd recognized the trap 30 seconds before it closed, ejecting from her aircraft just as the missiles achieved lock-on. The explosion that followed was designed to vaporize any evidence of her survival, but Catherine had spent her career studying the mathematics of aerial combat. She'd calculated the blast radius, the debris pattern, and the optimal ejection sequence with the same precision she'd used to calculate bombing runs. The official reports had been filed within hours of the explosion. Colonel Reeves personally signed the casualty notification, his signature authorizing the military death benefits that would be paid to Catherine's family. The memorial service had been his idea, a public demonstration of military solidarity that concealed the private knowledge that he'd ordered the execution of one of the Air Force's most skilled pilots. But Victor Reeves had made one critical error. He'd assumed that killing Catherine Thorne would eliminate the threat to his operation. He'd failed to consider that a dead pilot couldn't be court-martialed, couldn't be monitored by military intelligence, and couldn't be controlled by the bureaucratic machinery that had enabled his corruption. General Blackwood studied the classified files with growing horror. The arms-dealing operation that Catherine had attempted to expose in 2012 was the same network that now threatened her former squadron. 7 years of weapons trafficking had created a sophisticated network of surface-to-air missile systems throughout the Middle East, all coordinated by the same intelligence apparatus that had orchestrated her supposed death. "Sir," Colonel Martinez said quietly, "if Major Thorne is alive, and if she's the pilot in that aircraft, then she's not just running unauthorized operations. She's conducting a one-woman war against the people who tried to kill her." The general nodded slowly. The mysterious aircraft sightings suddenly made sense. Catherine Thorne wasn't just flying random missions. She was systematically dismantling the network that had destroyed her official life. Each appearance corresponded to disrupted weapons shipments, eliminated arms dealers, and destroyed missile installations. The ghost in the machine was conducting the most elaborate revenge operation in military history, and she was winning. The 421st Fighter Squadron received their mission briefing at 800 hours, unaware that their flight plans had been compromised for the third time in 6 months. Captain Marcus Steele Rodriguez studied the tactical display with growing unease. The interdiction mission seemed straightforward: intercept an arms shipment moving through the Strait of Hormuz, but something about the intelligence felt wrong. "This is the same route we flew last month," he commented to his wingman, Lieutenant Amy Falcon Chen. "Same approach vector, same altitude, same time of day. Feels like we're following a script." Lieutenant Chen nodded, her fingers drumming against her flight helmet. "Intel's been sloppy lately. Too many coincidences, too many perfect setups. Makes you wonder who's really writing these mission parameters." The squadron's commanding officer, Colonel David Hammer Williams, had inherited command of the Black Widows after the previous co's transfer to a Pentagon desk job. He'd been briefed on the unit's history, including the loss of Major Catherine Thorne 7 years earlier. Her photograph still hung in the squadron ready room, a reminder of the dangers inherent in their profession. But Colonel Williams had also been briefed on information that wasn't contained in official files. The same intelligence network that had eliminated Catherine Thorne was still active, still providing tactical support to insurgent groups throughout the region. The difference was that now they knew about it, and they were using that knowledge to set their own trap. "Gentlemen and ladies," Colonel Williams announced to the assembled pilots, "today's mission has been modified. We'll be following standard flight protocols, but our actual target is different from what you've been briefed. Intelligence indicates that our real enemy isn't the arms dealers we're supposed to intercept. It's the people who have been setting us up to fail." The briefing room fell silent. Military pilots were trained to follow orders without question, but they were also trained to recognize when the tactical situation had changed. The fact that their commanding officer was deviating from official mission parameters suggested that something significant was happening. "Sir," Captain Rodriguez asked carefully, "are we talking about a counterintelligence operation?" Colonel Williams nodded. "We have reason to believe that someone within our own command structure has been providing flight plans to hostile forces. Today's mission is designed to identify that source and eliminate the threat." The pilots exchanged glances. Counterintelligence operations were typically handled by specialized units, not frontline fighter squadrons. The fact that they were being tasked with this mission suggested that the threat was immediate and that conventional channels had been compromised. "What about the mysterious aircraft sightings?" Lieutenant Chen asked. "Command's been scrambling intercept missions for weeks, but nobody's been able to identify the pilot or the aircraft configuration." Colonel Williams paused, considering how much classified information he could share. "We believe that aircraft may be connected to our current situation. The pilot appears to be conducting independent operations against the same targets we're investigating. It's possible that we're dealing with a friendly asset who's operating outside official channels." The implications hung in the air like smoke. An unauthorized aircraft conducting military operations suggested either a rogue pilot or a highly classified program that exceeded their clearance levels. Either possibility meant that today's mission would be unlike anything they'd experienced before. As the pilots prepared for departure, none of them realized that Catherine Thorne was monitoring their communications from her hidden position in the mountains above the airfield. She'd been tracking their squadron's activities for weeks, waiting for the right moment to intervene. Today's mission would provide that opportunity. The dead pilot was about to save the living, and the sky would bear witness to a reunion 7 years in the making. Catherine's modified F-16 lifted off from the concealed airstrip as the first rays of dawn painted the mountains gold. The aircraft's radar signature was deliberately masked, its electronic countermeasures creating a ghost that existed in the spaces between detection systems. She'd spent years perfecting the art of invisible flight, becoming a phantom that could appear and disappear at will. The cockpit felt like coming home. Every switch, every indicator, every subtle vibration of the airframe was familiar territory. She'd flown combat missions in aircraft like this one, but never with such personal stakes. Today wasn't about tactical objectives or strategic goals. Today was about protecting the people who'd once been her family. "Resurrection copies all frequencies," she murmured into her radio, though no one was listening. The call sign was private, a reminder that death wasn't always permanent. She died in these mountains 7 years ago, but the sky had given her a second chance at life. Now she intended to use that gift to prevent her former squadron from sharing her fate. The flight to the Persian Gulf took 3 hours, during which Catherine monitored multiple communication channels simultaneously. Her electronic warfare suite was more sophisticated than anything the military had deployed, combining stolen technology with her own innovations. She could hear the 421st Fighter Squadron's pre-flight checks, their tactical communications, and the coordination traffic between various command centers. But she could also hear something else, the same encrypted communications that had betrayed her 7 years ago. The frequency was different, the encryption more sophisticated, but the underlying pattern was identical. Someone was providing real-time intelligence to hostile forces, feeding them information about American flight operations. Catherine's hands tightened on the flight controls. The betrayal that had killed her official life was still active, still claiming victims. The arms-dealing network she'd attempted to expose had grown more sophisticated, more dangerous. But they'd made one crucial error. They'd assumed that dead pilots couldn't return to finish unfinished business. The Persian Gulf spread below her like a vast mirror, reflecting the morning sky in shades of blue and gold. Somewhere in this expanse, her former squadron was flying toward another carefully orchestrated trap. The surface-to-air missiles were already in position, their operators briefed on American flight patterns and defensive capabilities. The only variable they hadn't accounted for was a ghost who'd learned to fly in the spaces between life and death. Catherine activated her targeting systems, their electronic hum a familiar melody. The weapon's loadout was eclectic: air-to-air missiles acquired from various sources, precision-guided munitions that had been lost during inventory transfers, and electronic warfare packages that could disable enemy systems without destroying them. She'd become a one-woman arms dealer, except her weapons were designed to protect American pilots rather than kill them. The radio crackled with distant voices: air traffic control, commercial aviation, the routine communications of a world that continued to function despite the hidden wars being fought in its skies. Catherine listened to it all, waiting for the specific frequency that would signal the beginning of today's operation. When the 421st Fighter Squadron's lead aircraft checked in with departure control, Catherine felt her heart rate increase. Those voices belonged to pilots she'd trained with, flown beside, shared countless hours of dangerous sky. They were flying toward death, and they didn't even know it. But death would have to wait. Catherine Thorne had an appointment with the sky, and she intended to keep it. The trap was set with mechanical precision. 12 surface-to-air missile systems had been positioned along the 421st Fighter Squadron's flight path, their operators linked by encrypted communications to a coordination center that tracked American aircraft movements in real time. The intelligence was perfect, too perfect, suggesting access to classified flight plans that should have been impossible for insurgent groups to obtain. Catherine watched the tactical display from her position 30,000 feet above the Persian Gulf. Her aircraft's sensors could detect the missile installations despite their camouflage, the electronic emissions from their targeting radars creating a constellation of death across the water below. The 421st was flying directly toward the center of that constellation, their flight path predetermined by mission planners who'd been fed false intelligence. Black Widow lead, this is departure control. You're cleared to proceed to waypoint Alpha 7. Maintain current altitude and heading. The air traffic controller's voice was professionally neutral, but Catherine recognized the slight tension that suggested classified operations. Departure control, Black Widow lead copies, proceeding to waypoint Alpha 7. Colonel Williams's voice carried the confidence of a pilot who'd flown hundreds of combat missions. He had no way of knowing that waypoint Alpha 7 was the center of the kill zone, positioned to maximize the effectiveness of the waiting missiles. Catherine's fingers hovered over her weapon systems. She could engage the missile installations individually, but that would reveal her position and capabilities. The better option was to jam their communications, breaking the coordination that made the trap effective. But jamming would also alert the traitor within the American command structure, potentially compromising future operations. The decision was made for her when the first missile system achieved lock-on. The electronic warning tone was audible across multiple frequencies, a death knell that meant the 421st Fighter Squadron had less than 30 seconds to live. Catherine's training took over, her finger finding the trigger without conscious thought. All Black Widow aircraft, this is Guardian Angel. Break left immediately and descend to Angels 15. Multiple missile locks from your 2 o'clock position. Her voice cut through the tactical frequency with the authority of someone who'd flown these skis for decades. The response was immediate confusion. Guardian Angel wasn't a recognized call sign, and the voice wasn't familiar to any of the pilots. But the urgency in the transmission was unmistakable, and military pilots were trained to respond to threat warnings regardless of their source. Guardian Angel, this is Black Widow lead. Identify yourself and your position. Colonel Williams's voice was sharp with professional suspicion, but his aircraft was already banking left in response to the warning. Black Widow lead, no time for credentials. You're flying into a coordinated SAM trap. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers and return to base. Catherine's aircraft was already diving toward the missile installations, her targeting systems locked onto the coordination center that controlled the entire network. The first missile launched as she spoke, its solid rocket motor igniting with a brilliant flash against the morning sky. The 421st Fighter Squadron scattered like startled birds, their formation breaking as individual pilots initiated evasive maneuvers. But the missile had been fired at their predicted position, not their actual location. The trap was failing because the bait had been warned. Catherine's first strike eliminated the coordination center, her precision-guided munition detonating exactly where the encrypted communications originated. The explosion sent a column of smoke and flame into the morning air, but more importantly, it severed the electronic links that allowed the missile installations to coordinate their attacks. The remaining missiles fired independently, their operators forced to rely on individual targeting systems rather than networked intelligence. The 421st Fighter Squadron's evasive maneuvers proved effective against uncoordinated attacks, their aircraft twisting through the sky like dancers, avoiding deadly partners. But Catherine wasn't finished. She'd identified the traitor. The encrypted transmission that had coordinated the attack originated from a communication center at Al Dafra Air Base, transmitted on a frequency that required command-level access authorization. Catherine's electronic warfare suite had tracked the signal to its source, identifying the specific equipment and even the individual operator responsible for the betrayal. Colonel Victor Reeves had been promoted since orchestrating Catherine's supposed death 7 years ago. He now held a position in the Combined Air Operations Center, where his access to flight plans and tactical intelligence made him invaluable to the arms-dealing network he'd helped create. The man who tried to kill her was now trying to kill her former squadron. Catherine's aircraft dove toward the airbase, its modified stealth characteristics allowing her to approach undetected. The base's air defense systems were designed to protect against external threats, not aircraft that appeared to be friendly assets returning from missions. Her approach vector and electronic signature would register as normal traffic until she was too close to intercept. Al Dafra Tower, this is Resurrection requesting emergency landing clearance. Aircraft damaged, need immediate medical assistance. Her voice was steady, professional, exactly what air traffic controllers expected to hear from a pilot in distress. Resurrection, this is Al Dafra Tower. You're not showing on our flight manifest. Please identify your squadron and mission designation. The tower operator's voice carried the routine suspicion of military air traffic control, but no immediate alarm. Al Dafra Tower, Resurrection is operating under classified designation. Request priority handling for emergency medical situation. Catherine's aircraft was already in the landing pattern, its gear extended and flaps configured for approach. The confusion at ground level was understandable. An unidentified aircraft requesting emergency landing was unusual but not unprecedented. The base's security protocols required verification, but emergency situations demanded immediate response. The tower operator chose to err on the side of caution, clearing the aircraft for landing while simultaneously alerting base security. Catherine's modified F-16 touched down on runway 9 with the precision of a pilot who'd made thousands of similar landings. The aircraft's unusual configuration was now visible to ground personnel, its hybrid stealth characteristics and non-standard weapon mounts clearly indicating unauthorized modifications. But she was already taxiing toward the operations center, her canopy sealed, and her identity concealed. The base's security response was swift but predictable. Military police vehicles converged on the aircraft, their occupants prepared for anything from terrorist infiltration to foreign espionage. What they weren't prepared for was a dead pilot returning to settle accounts with the living. Catherine powered down the engines and waited. Through her cockpit display, she could see Colonel Reeves emerging from the operations center, his face pale with recognition. He'd seen the aircraft before, in classified footage that officially didn't exist. The ghost he'd tried to bury 7 years ago had materialized on his runway. The standoff lasted exactly 30 seconds. Then Catherine's canopy opened, and Major Catherine "Viper" Thorne stepped onto the tarmac for the first time in 7 years. She was older, scarred, her flight suit bearing no rank insignia or unit patches. But her eyes held the same fierce intelligence that had made her one of the Air Force's most skilled pilots. The security personnel raised their weapons, but Catherine ignored them. Her attention was focused entirely on Colonel Reeves, who stood frozen in the doorway of the operations center. 7 years of carefully constructed lies were unraveling, and he knew it. "Hello, Victor," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the tarmac with perfect clarity. "We need to talk." The detention facility at Al-Dafra Air Base wasn't designed for holding Air Force officers, but Catherine Thorne presented unique circumstances that required creative solutions. She'd surrendered without resistance, her only request being that Colonel Reeves be present during her initial interrogation. The base commander had agreed, though he'd also tripled the security presence and requested guidance from higher command. General Blackwood arrived by military transport 4 hours after Catherine's arrest, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he was briefed on the situation. The woman who'd been officially dead for 7 years was now in custody, her aircraft secured in a classified hangar, while intelligence specialists analyzed its modifications. The story she'd told during initial questioning was so extraordinary that it required verification at the highest levels. She claims that Colonel Reeves orchestrated her death in 2012, the base commander reported, his voice tight with disbelief. She alleges that he's been providing intelligence to hostile forces for years, and that today's mission was designed to eliminate the 421st Fighter Squadron. General Blackwood nodded slowly. He'd already reviewed the classified files, cross-referencing Catherine's claims with operational records that painted a disturbing picture of systematic betrayal. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling, suggesting a conspiracy that extended far beyond a single corrupt officer. "Has Colonel Reeves been secured?" he asked. "Yes, sir. He's been relieved of duty pending investigation. Initial review of his communications logs shows multiple contacts with individuals connected to arms-dealing networks in the region." The base commander's voice carried the bitter taste of discovering betrayal within his own command structure. General Blackwood entered the detention facility to find Catherine Thorne sitting calmly at a metal table, her hands folded in front of her. She looked older than her service photographs, her face marked by years of survival in hostile environments. But her eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had made her exceptional as a pilot. "Major Thorne," he said, taking the seat across from her. "Or should I say the late Major Thorne, you've caused quite a stir." Catherine's smile was thin but genuine. "General Blackwood, I remember your briefings from flight school. You always said that the best pilots were the ones who could adapt to impossible situations. I also said that the best pilots followed orders and worked within the chain of command." His voice carried the weight of 3 decades of military service, but no condemnation. "You've been operating outside official channels for 7 years. Official channels tried to kill me, sir. When your own command structure becomes the enemy, adaptation requires new definitions of duty." Catherine's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I've been doing what I was trained to do, protect American pilots and disrupt enemy operations. The fact that I had to die officially to do it effectively doesn't change the mission. General Blackwood studied her carefully. The woman across from him was clearly Catherine Thorne, but she'd been transformed by 7 years of survival in the shadows. The pilot who died in Afghanistan had been reborn as something more dangerous and infinitely more determined. "The evidence against Colonel Reeves is substantial," he said finally. "Your electronic warfare suite recorded his communications with the missile installations. Combined with the operational records from your supposed death, we have enough to convict him of treason." Catherine nodded. Victor was never the architect, just a useful tool. The real network is bigger, more sophisticated. I've been tracking it for years, dismantling it piece by piece. But they keep growing, keep finding new sources within our own command structure. And you've been conducting a one-woman war against them. It wasn't a question. Someone had to. The official channels were compromised, and dead pilots don't have to worry about court-martials or bureaucratic oversight. Catherine's expression hardened. "I've been free to do what needed to be done." General Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. "What needs to be done now?" The courtroom at Ramstein Air Base was closed to the media, its proceedings classified at levels that required special security clearances even for the stenographers. Colonel Victor Reeves sat at the defendant's table, his service uniform stripped of all insignia except his name tag. The man who'd once commanded respect as a decorated officer now faced charges that would result in either life imprisonment or execution. Catherine Thorne took the witness stand wearing a civilian suit, her testimony being recorded for posterity, despite the classified nature of the proceedings. She'd been officially reinstated to active duty with full back pay and benefits, though her actual status within the military hierarchy remained deliberately ambiguous. The Air Force had decided that having a dead pilot was sometimes more useful than having a living one. "Major Thorne," the prosecution attorney began, "please describe for the court your relationship with the defendant prior to March 2012. Catherine's voice was clear and professional. "Colonel Reeves was my commanding officer in the 421st Fighter Squadron. I respected him as a leader and trusted him with my life on numerous occasions. That trust was the reason I initially reported my suspicions about intelligence leaks through official channels." "And what was Colonel Reeves's response to your concerns?" "He assured me that he would investigate the matter personally. He also volunteered to assign me to a special mission that would allow me to gather additional evidence about the suspected leaks." Catherine paused, her eyes finding Reeves across the courtroom. "I later learned that this mission was designed to eliminate me." The prosecution presented evidence methodically. Communications intercepts, financial records, testimony from arms dealers who'd agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. The picture that emerged was of a network that had been operating for over a decade, with Colonel Reeves serving as a key intelligence source. The defense attorney, a military lawyer who'd been assigned to the case, attempted to challenge Catherine's credibility. "Major Thorne, you've been operating outside legal authority for 7 years. You've engaged in weapons trafficking, unauthorized military operations, and multiple violations of international law. How can this court trust the testimony of someone who has repeatedly demonstrated disregard for military regulations?" Catherine's response was measured. "I've been doing what I was trained to do, protect American service members and disrupt enemy operations. The fact that I had to operate outside official channels to accomplish these objectives doesn't invalidate the mission." "But you've killed people, Major. You've destroyed property, violated sovereignty, and engaged in activities that would be considered terrorism if conducted by anyone else." "I've engaged in warfare, counselor. The same warfare that every combat pilot engages in, with the same objectives and the same rules of engagement. The only difference is that I've been doing it without official sanction because the official channels were compromised." The turning point came when the prosecution introduced evidence of the missile trap that had nearly killed the 421st Fighter Squadron. Gun camera footage showed Catherine's aircraft engaging multiple surface-to-air missile installations, her precise strikes eliminating threats that would have killed every pilot in the formation. Major Thorne, the prosecution attorney asked, why did you choose to reveal yourself and intervene directly in this operation? Catherine's voice softened slightly. Because they were going to kill my family. Not my biological family, but the people who'd been my squadron mates, my friends, my brothers and sisters in arms. I couldn't let that happen, even if it meant exposing myself and ending my ability to operate in the shadows. The courtroom was silent as the implications sank in. Catherine Thorne had sacrificed 7 years of effective counterintelligence operations to save 12 pilots. She'd chosen the living over the dead, the present over the past. Colonel Reeves was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment. But the trial's real significance wasn't the punishment of a single traitor. It was the recognition that sometimes the most effective warriors are the ones who officially don't exist. The debriefing took place in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, its participants representing the highest levels of military intelligence. Catherine sat at the head of the table, her temporary civilian status allowing her to speak freely about operations that would have been impossible to discuss through official channels. The network you've been tracking extends into at least 12 countries, General Blackwood said, studying the intelligence files Catherine had provided. Arms dealers, corrupt officials, military officers, intelligence operatives. How did you manage to map all of this operating alone? Catherine's smile was grim. I had advantages that official intelligence doesn't possess. I was dead, so I couldn't be monitored or controlled. I had no official obligations, so I could operate in areas where American personnel aren't supposed to go, and I had a very personal motivation to succeed. The intelligence files were staggering in their scope. 7 years of patient investigation had uncovered a sophisticated network that had been responsible for thousands of American casualties. Catherine's individual operations had disrupted weapons shipments, eliminated key personnel, and gathered intelligence that would have been impossible to obtain through conventional means. "What's your assessment of the current threat level?" asked Colonel Martinez, now serving as the Pentagon's liaison for unconventional warfare operations. "The network is wounded but not destroyed. They've lost key personnel in several major operational centers, but they're adaptable. They'll reorganize, find new sources, develop new methods. The fundamental problem hasn't changed. There are still people within our own command structure who can be bought or coerced into betraying their oath." General Blackwood nodded. "Which brings us to the real question. Major Thorne, you've been offered full reinstatement with promotion to lieutenant colonel and assignment to any command of your choosing. You've also been offered a position with the CIA's Special Operations Division, but you've declined both offers. Why?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Because official channels have limitations that make them ineffective against this type of threat. Rules of engagement, international law, bureaucratic oversight. These things are necessary for a functioning military, but they're also vulnerabilities that can be exploited by enemies who don't follow the same rules." "Are you saying that you want to remain dead?" "I'm saying that Catherine Thorne the pilot served her country well, but Catherine Thorne the ghost can serve it better. The network we've been discussing doesn't respond to official pressure or diplomatic solutions. It responds to the kind of direct action that can only be conducted by someone who officially doesn't exist." The room was silent as the implication sank in. Catherine was proposing to return to the shadows, to resume her one-woman war against a network that threatened American service members worldwide. But this time, she would have official support, however deniable. "What would you need?" General Blackwood asked finally. Catherine's answer was immediate. A modified aircraft, access to real-time intelligence, and the understanding that I'll be operating under rules that don't appear in any military manual. I'll need to be able to go places and do things that would be impossible for official personnel. And in return, I'll continue doing what I've been doing for 7 years, protecting American pilots and dismantling the networks that threaten them. The difference is that now you'll know where the intelligence is coming from. General Blackwood looked around the table at the other participants. The proposal was unprecedented, ethically questionable, and potentially illegal. It was also